Hello and welcome. My name's George, and my channel is all about helping you get the most out of Logic Pro so that you can record and produce your best music in your home studio. I recently recorded a 4-piece band where we did everything live and shot an accompanying video at the same time, and I just wanted to walk you through how I prepared for that session and how I ultimately went to record that session. So I'll go over all the gear I used, all the different mics, and things that you might want to consider when getting ready for a session like this. So let's dive in. Okay, so before we dive into the preparation stage of things, I just want to quickly show you the session and give you a little clip of the video so you can see kind of what we're dealing with. So this video was published recently by the Cody Larsen band, and I'll have the link in the description so you can check that out for yourselves. So as you saw, we're dealing with a 4-piece band. We've got bass, drums, keyboard, and guitar. So the first part of my process is to actually map out how I'm going to record this and how many channels and what kind of gear I'm going to need. And you can do this with a simple pen and paper, but I usually pull up a spreadsheet to do this, and I have a little bit of a template that I use. So for starters, I map out how many inputs I'm dealing with. In this case, I had 16 inputs available to me. And from there, I decide how I'm going to record each instrument. So let's start with the drums. So for the drums, I decided to use 6 inputs. So a mic on the kick drum. I use this Shure Beta 52A mic, which is a great little dynamic kick mic. And then I mic'd the snare, rack tom, and floor tom. Those all got the trusty Shure SM57. And then for my overheads, I have the Rode NT2A small condenser microphone. So I have the condenser microphone for the overheads to pick up all the cymbals and most of the kit, and then dynamic mics on all the other drums to try and isolate those as much as possible and cut down on some bleed between the different pieces of the drums. Now, if you're short on channels, the drums are usually the one thing that takes up the most. So you can start cutting back on those. So for example, I could get rid of the toms and leave the overheads to pick up the toms. And so that would be 4 mics. And if I need to cut down further, well, I could cut down 1 overhead. So I just have 1 overhead in the center rather than a spaced stereo pair. So that would be 3. And if I want to cut that down even further, then I would get rid of the snare and just have the kick and 1 overhead. And then the overhead can pick up the snare and everything else. And I just have my dedicated kick microphone. And if you needed to, you could go all the way down just to the 1 microphone for the drum set. If you can do at least the kick and snare and 1 overhead, then that's a great start. And then you can build it up from there. Next, I also had a room mic, this Rode NT2A, and I'll show you how I use this in the mix later on, but this just helps capture everything that's going on in the room, and I just use a little bit of that in the mix, which I'll show you a bit later. The bass, I just had that plugged in directly into one of my preamps, so they didn't even have an amp with them. It was just directly into my preamp. The guitar, again, we had our trusty Shure SM57 on that, around the center of cone, maybe 1 inch off the grill. The keyboard, it took the left and right channel, and again, those are just directly into the audio interface. So again, no amp for the keyboard as well. And then we did record 2 songs, one with vocal and one without. The one I'm showing you today is without. But for the one that we did with vocals, we had this Shure SM7B that I'm using right now for this video. So those were all the mics that we used for this recording. And you'll notice that kind of I keep the order based on the instrument. So I have all my drums grouped together, and then bass guitar, keys, and vocals. And I generally kind of keep the same order every time I do a recording, and that way it just makes it easier to remember when you're patching things in. Generally, if you have them in the same inputs, then you don't have to kind of chase cables all the time and guess what thing is plugged in where. And if you have it written down like this helps a lot too. The other thing I have written down on here is, you see this VP26 and 321 and GR. So these are some external preamps that I have. So all the ones that are blank, these are just going directly into my audio interface. And then I have a couple external preamps that I use as well. So I've got the 5 of those. So I had to decide kind of where I wanted to put those. And I used 2 for the drum overheads to try and capture the overheads as cleanly as possible. And then same with the bass. Bass is quite important, so I wanted to use one of those for the bass and the guitar as well. And same with the vocals. The keyboards, and those were kind of direct. I figured I'd get a nice clean sound out of that. Anyways, and the rest of the drum kit, I wasn't too concerned with as well. So that was kind of my thought process for those. And then just more from my own planning to make sure that I have all the gear, writing down how many XLR cables I'm going to need. So things that are plugged in directly to the interface, we just need a patch cable for those. So I didn't include that. And then same with mic stands. So a short mic stand for the kick drum. And then I have some clips for the drums. So those don't need a dedicated stand. And then the overheads and the room mic and the vocal, those needed stands. So this way, before we start anything, I have it all planned out and I know exactly how I'm going to get set up in my room when the musicians get here. Now for the audio interface, I was using a Motu 896 MK3. It's a bit of a older interface, but it still does the trick. And it has 8 channels, 8 built-in preamps in it. And as you saw, I needed a few more preamps as well. So I also have, again, an even older Motu interface, the Motu 8 Pre. And this is a Firewire version interface. So the interface itself doesn't actually get recognized by my computer anymore, but it has what's called ADAT on it. So I can connect those 8 preamps to my other interface using ADAT cables, and that sends a digital signal from my 8 Pre to my other Motu interface. So that gives me a total of 16 preamps. So just a little side note, if you do have an older Firewire interface that's collecting dust and it's no longer recognized by your computer, check to see if it has ADAT on it. Because if it does, then you can still hook it up to your newer interface and still make use of those preamps and expand your system a little bit. Now, the other piece of gear you're going to need when you're recording a full band is some sort of headphone amp, because most interfaces only have 1 or 2 headphone outputs. So if you're doing a full 4 or more people, you're going to need a way for them to all hear themselves. So I have another kind of older piece of gear, but it works just fine. This PreSonus HP4, which allows up to 4 headphones. Now, the one downside is everyone's sharing the same mix on this because they're just getting one feed from your audio interface and it just splits it into 4 more feeds. So the one downside is everyone is on the same mix, but it allows you to expand your headphones easily and at a pretty cheap price. So now for the actual recording. So we did this all live with everyone playing together. They were playing to a click, and I'll just go over the different tracks quickly here. So we have, let's start with the kick. So you'll notice the kick right here, and that's the Shure Beta 52A. So that's just going through the porthole of the kick drum. It is all the way in the drum, but not too far inside. If you have it on the outside of the hole, you're going to get kind of a big burst of air coming through that hole there. And you're going to get, it's going to kind of overload the mic with, it's going to sound like bass, but it's not really kind of defined. So if you can get it, I suggest you get it a little bit more in there. And then kind of the closer you get to the beater side of the kick drum, the more of that kind of attack you're going to get. So you can kind of balance out the sound you're going for. So this is the kick on its own. Without any EQ or anything, it sounded like that. And after a little bit of EQ and compression. And then I did blend that in with a sample. So this is Trigger 2 from Slate Audio. So the sample on its own sounds like this. And then the two blended together. Without the sample, with the sample. So that just kind of beefs it up a little bit. It still sounds great without the sample, and not every style of music needs it, but in this case, I thought, why not? And then the snare on this song is a little unique because it's mostly side stick, so not a lot of kind of direct hits on the snare. Again, SM57 just at the rim of the snare, kind of pointed down. So nothing too special going on there. The toms are mic'd similarly. You can see there the 57 just pointed down, and the same thing is happening with the floor tom. And then the overheads, those are those Rode NT2A condensers. I just have those spaced above the kick. And one thing I like to do is have them at the very edge of the kick drum. And then that just helps you kind of visually have them centered on the drum kit. So just place them at the edge of the kick drum and at the same height. And then you have them nicely spaced equal distance off the center of the kick drum. So those sound like this. And then without any EQ or anything. So just kind of brightening them up a little bit and filtering out some of that low end, so the kick and snare a little bit, because we don't really need that in the overhead in this case, since we have dedicated mics for the kick and snare. But if I was relying more on those overheads, then I probably wouldn't roll it off as much. And then the room, let's see if we can get a shot of that room mic. There it is. So it's pointing at the drums because that's the loudest thing in the room. So that sounds like this. And without any of the EQ or compression, and with it on. Off. So for the rooms, I have them really overly compressed with this 20:1 ratio, and that just helps kind of bring everything up and kind of exaggerate it. So if you listen, you'll hear kind of the toms really kind of get louder and pop out with this on. So it almost sounds like a little trashy on its own, but when you just kind of blend that in with the rest of the drums, the rest of the track, it sounds pretty good. Why don't I just solo the whole drums, and then I'll bring that room in so you can hear. So you can hear when I turn the rooms on, it just kind of makes those drums pop, right, and liven up a lot more. So that's something I like to do a lot, just over compress the room mics to help kind of bring some energy. Now the bass, again, this was just plugged directly into my preamp, so no amp or no nothing. With all the effects off. So nothing drastic, a little bit of compression and a little bit of EQ here, but not much else other than that. It sounded pretty good to begin with. Now the guitar, again, SM57 on the amp, and that sounded like this. Let's go to the beginning here. So without any of the plugins, sounded like this. So just a little bit of compression and a little bit of EQ, and then some stereo delay here with the Logic delay, and a little bit of reverb with the Valhalla Vintage Verb. And then the keyboard, I should probably renamed organ. Again, that was just direct in. So direct, no bleed, don't have to deal with any of that. And it sounds pretty good to begin with. So again, not a whole lot, a little bit of compression, a little bit of EQ. And then same here, some reverb and delay. So without that, it sounds like this. And then with the reverb and delay. And then the last thing is just some effects on my master bus. So I have this virtual mix bus that's just kind of a Neve emulator. This Fresh Air, which this is a free plugin and I like a lot, just kind of adds in a little bit of air high-end information. Gullfoss, I really love this plugin on the master bus. I've got a separate dedicated video on this plugin, and I really like it. It just helps. You see this recover and tame, so it just kind of recovers some things that were lost and tames some frequencies that are a little bit overbearing. That's a great little final polish to your mix. Then I have a little bit of compression, nothing crazy. You can see just around 1 dB of compression, just to kind of glue everything together a little bit. And then a little bit of tape emulation. And then to finish off, ozone for a little bit of limiting and mastering here. And then the last plugin I have is just the Logic loudness meter, just to see where my levels are at. And so the final product sounds like this. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like the music, be sure to check out the Cody Larsen Band online. And again, I'll link the video in the description below. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave those in the comments as well. And if you want to improve your workflow in Logic Pro, don't forget to download my free Ultimate Logic Pro Starter Pack. This includes my Logic Pro Hotkey Cheat Sheet, my audio recording guide, my mixing guide, my gear guide, and my Logic Pro session templates. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.